Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news. Today is Wednesday, August the 14th here. So, yeah, I'm starting a little late. My camera system decided its hard drive is filled up, and seems like its way of telling people that is to simply just beep non-stop as it struggles to run. Shouldn't fill up in the first place, but I have had some power outages that probably caused some problems. I'm looking at my Twitter here, which I've tweaked some more. I don't know why I'm starting off messing with the custom CSS on Twitter, considering I don't even show Twitter that much. But here we can see MXR, who was recently kicked out of a ban from YouTube completely. He is now, I guess, trying to get jobs for his editors or video assistants, or hire himself out. I finished playing Islands of Insight, and one thing that shocked me about Islands of Insight was that there actually was a Western team of MIT students that made the game, or at least is claiming to have mostly made the game. I still feel like there's probably some Asian influence and secondary team that made a lot of it. But yeah, the game is just weird. It's way too many puzzles. I think it was made by MIT nerds for MIT nerds who like puzzles and just don't really know anything really about video games per se. And that's why it is just this weird puzzle game experience. But yeah, overall I don't really have anything super special to even say about Islands of Insight. Like, I didn't do but maybe 5% of the total puzzles in the game. I cheated my way through the 21 mysteries. I saw the 2 extra enclave areas, which one definitely feels like it's a vertical slice in that it was made probably early in development to make the game sell to publishers. The whole game feels like it's a sales pitch for them to get more work as publishers, which explains the multitude of different systems. So we don't have a festival going on right now on Yu-Gi-Oh! I've effectively just stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. But yeah, the Island of Curiosities is puzzles, is very much just like what the game would be if the game was a lot smaller. And honestly, even it had the Island of Curiosities, or it's called the Archipelago of Curiosities really. Had that been the entirety of the game, it would have been a decent $5 game at that point. Or probably needed to be bigger than that one enclave, but there's like 200 puzzles there. The Archipelago of Curiosities would be very similar to the free Sigils of Elohim side game that the Talos Principle released before Islands of Insight was originally released. Apparently the company that made Islands of Insight's been around since like 2010. They made a couple other games that don't really matter, but it also kind of makes me wonder if the game was in development hell and was developed or began development well before things like The Witness and Islands of Insight would have really happened. But yeah, I'm just frustrated and done with it, so I'm done with it. Yeah, I saw all a percentage of all the content, and there's really nothing, no real story there, no real purpose, no reason why you're solving the puzzles, which would have been fine. In The Witness, there's no reason to solve those puzzles either, but there's not so many of it that it becomes super overwhelming. Like, I probably spent between 80 and 100 hours playing Islands of Insight. Had they gotten it down to a tight 60, that would have been much better of a situation. And they certainly could have done that by just leaving a lot of things on the cutting room floor, and they could have dragged me along to be more interested in the game instead of losing interest very early. But by simply having have some kind of story that actually mattered, have some kind of actual mystery. Like, it is a terrible storytelling method to say there is this godlike creature who has created you and created this world just to keep you busy and just as an educational thing, and that you're going to be perfectly safe in the world, that it's never going to have any real sense of danger, and you're going to do nothing other than solve the puzzles. It's effectively what Portal 1 would have been had you removed GLaDOS, which, just think of that statement for a second and you know how dumb that is as an idea. But had you removed GLaDOS and removed the escape sequence at the second half of Portal, had you just done all of the puzzles, and then when the cake is the lie scene happens in Portal 1, you don't have that puzzle at all. You just have more puzzles and more puzzles and more puzzles. I mean, that would be pretty crazy. Even the co-op puzzling in Portal 2 with the two robots are very much designed around a final sequence and a limited amount of puzzles. It doesn't just go on forever, even though that's exactly what GLaDOS says she's programmed to want and desires, just the puzzle forever. We have several big bits of news, and also, I guess, I've been killing some time messing around with Waydroid on Steam. There is Waydroid, which runs Android on different versions of Linux, and then Waydroid on Steam is a fork side project, spin-off project that takes Waydroid and just makes it easier to run specifically on the Steam Deck, which doesn't have direct Wayland support because SteamOS uses GameScope and XWayland as compatibility layers. So it's not a one-to-one comparison, so little tweaks need to be done. So yeah, I've been irritating the person, I imagine, with my enthusiasm, my brief enthusiasm that's going to evaporate, as to just get his script to work a little bit better and be set up a little bit better. Because yeah, I definitely think that is the way of the future, is to, at the very least, establish that this works and this makes a lot of sense. Now, inherently, I still think Valve is not going to want Google Play Store running alongside the Steam storefront installed by default on Steam Decks. Although they may not really care, because it is very much not an apples to apples comparison, and unless Valve is going to go into the mobile market, they might as well move early and let the Google Play Store in there. So Waydroid needs to use probably the open source F-Droid storefront instead and not integrate any Google software. It is also very possible Google themselves may not want their systems and being emulated and run on the Steam Deck. It is also possible, since I believe there was a recent ruling against Google, that maybe Google would get broken up into several different stores. I could see certainly the store concepts and the ad concepts being separated away from the Android concepts and the Chrome concepts. As far as a browser, I could see a breakup happening there, where Chrome just has to be completely separated away from from Google and Alphabet. I could see YouTube being, I could hopefully see YouTube being separated, but if YouTube was separated from Google, then there is also a question that they would just maybe shutter a lot of services on YouTube. They may just stop letting people upload videos. They may put severe limits. Anything like that would really ruin any future for my computer. For my YouTube channel particularly. But yeah, if they said you have to be in the YouTube Partner Program, or you can only upload, say, 100 videos, I have like 10,000 videos, that's a big deal. If they started deleting videos, that would be a huge deal. So yeah, there could be some big things that could happen around Google if anything happens, which is a big if. Certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if Google gets declared a monopoly and then just fights it for a decade and then eventually settles for a few $1 million. But yeah, that's not even going to directly be video game news. One of the things about Waydroid, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, is that it is automatically putting Android apps into the desktop mode of the Steam Deck. So you just click the start menu and you get the icons. Now, at the moment, the icons don't work, but boy, is that nice integration there, where you can just click on an icon, and I have gotten them to work, and then it will just open a window and launch an Android app just like it was almost the same as any other app. Now, there are some issues still there that you have to, the first time you launch an Android app, you're going to have to wait for the entire Android containerized operating system to boot up, which will take a minute or two. And there are still just functionalities that Waydroid does not connect directly to, such as the gyroscope on the Steam Deck. And the Steam input for gyroscope does not have a way of taking a 90-degree turn and sending a keyboard signal. It only can convert that to either joystick or mouse inputs. So I don't know how you can interconnect that. The best way would be to just get Waydroid to read the gyroscope data directly from the Steam Deck, but it can't. It can't even read the Wi-Fi information directly. So, yeah. Meanwhile, while Valve has been kind of slow to update the Steam Deck, they have clearly in the background been working hard on games, and I think that is what most people would be more interested in. It is definitely feeling like we are in a new era at Valve, where there are teams that are actually making updates to the storefront, there are teams that are actually making games, there are teams that made the Steam Deck. It isn't just sitting around collecting knife skin money. So Valve has this unannounced hero shooter called Deadlock, we assume, being one of the already peak concurrent players on Steam this week at 18,000 players. What's funny is they're saying that's already one of Steam's most played games. I don't know how 18,000 concurrent players peak wise is one of Valve's most played games, unless you're just saying it showed up on the SteamDB list somewhere, because we see much higher numbers than that in the top 10, and we will look at that list. Also, apparently a journalist was invited to play Deadlock and then reported on it and didn't actually agree to any kind of non-disclosure agreement, and honestly wasn't even invited to play by Valve and got banned. And now I think this is probably one of those stories where it's just a good excuse to hate on mainstream video game journalists for many different reasons. But I guess the basic argument here is that he's spoiling a game that's not even been announced yet by reporting on it, but isn't that what a reporter is doing anyways? So the reporters spoil games concept, I don't think is a very valid argument to make. So yeah, I imagine, I don't think he probably did anything wrong reporting on information he found or got, but also I imagine almost all mainstream video game journalists have done something wrong, so I'm not surprised people are hating on it. Meanwhile, Valve seems to be getting better press and more coverage and more excitement around Deadlock by saying nothing than they probably would have gotten had they said something. The only real danger now is that it might lead to overhyping of a game that hasn't even been announced. I still haven't worked on the CSS for Video Games Chronicles, so these pictures are still lightly shrunk down. But in this case, I think these pictures are showing the entirety of the picture just stretched and skewed, whereas on Twitter what is happening is it is taking kind of just the center or the top of the picture and stretching it out and cropping it, which gives you a different kind of appearance, certainly, but probably not as good of an appearance, because you actually probably would want to see the entirety of the picture, so there's still some work to be done there. I have noticed or figured out that particularly on Twitter they use article tags and image tags, so I can just have a more roundabout HTML CSS format here instead of using their obfuscated .css dash number letter number format. And yeah, these CSS instructions potentially could just be copy and pasted to many different websites and work for all of them, so that could be helpful too. Not all websites though use the Flex format that that Twitter uses, and not all of them use article tags though, so there would still need to be some tweaking. Valve seemingly was mentioning the ROG Ally and other handhelds. They have now officially confirmed that SteamOS is going to make its way to third-party handhelds, but Valve is still working on expanding the capabilities of all it and the Steam Deck, which I wouldn't be surprised if Valve doesn't inherently want to be in the hardware device market exclusively. They may just want competitors like the ROG Ally to run their operating system. In the long run, it's going to be cheaper and easier for Valve to just make SteamOS work than it is for them to constantly have to continue to invest development in a Steam Deck 2, Steam Deck 3, Steam Deck 4. There is people, I mean even I could see that if at the 1 year anniversary in I think about 5 or 6 months for the Steam Deck, or the 2 year anniversary, I could see there being a growing desire for a Steam Deck 2. And you really wouldn't have to change too much, but you would want just general refreshes as far as, can you get better battery life, can you get more storage, can you tweak a few things, because yeah, it's going to be a harder and harder sell 3 or 4 years down the line to tell people to buy the Steam Deck when the Steam Deck has 3 or 4 year old hardware in it. Of course, that completely breaks the concept of programming for just one set of hardware, and it definitely is creating a different kind of world than what we really have experienced before as far as things that feel like consoles. It gets much more into the PC side of things, where SteamOS on the ROG Ally may be able to run games better, or run some games at all that won't run on the Steam Deck, or vice versa. Things might run on the Steam Deck and not run on the ROG Ally. But yeah, and here's a great example of what I don't want on, as far as this is gamedeveloper.com, is I don't want these screenshots to be so narrow that there's big white spaces on the edge. And visually, I'm trying to get everything to look just about the same and have a black text on the white background, stretched out images, and news articles. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com also has this ethical games, is looking to craft an industry-wide ethics code and is seeking developer input. Yeah. It is very late point, certainly, to start talking about ethics and monetization and things like that. And I think when you use such a generic term like ethics, you're gonna get input and directionality that is just going to go in so many different directions. And frankly, there is major booby traps in that conversation, because I could very well see a bunch of California woke game developers saying that it would be completely unethical to make a game that did not include at least one developer who is a black person, for instance, or a woman. Well, that then immediately attacks, say, like Saudi Arabia game development, which wouldn't let women be game developers. I'm pretty sure that's true in Saudi Arabia. Or it immediately attacks every Japanese game development company that's not going to have any opportunity or possibility that they would have a black person on their team. So yeah, you run into these booby traps where realistic practical circumstances are thrown out of the way for ideal thoughts. You also run into the problem, as far as less woke and more just capitalist ethics versus real ethics, let's just call them that, in that very quickly you can have managers making an argument that your fiduciary duty makes it ethical for you to squeeze as much money out of gamers as possible, so you can pay your employees some larger amount, but not anywhere as much as you'd pay yourself, or pay your shareholders more money. Yep. So I think it is definitely a red flag to even use the phrase ethical there. I'll be interested to see if this goes anywhere, although most of the time these things don't really go anywhere, and short of having government enforcement, I don't see how establishing a industry-wide ethics code is going to really do too much. It's going to be about as valuable as pretty much any other ethics code that is thrown out there. It's going to be incredibly toothless and forgotten about. Let's see. The Fallout New Vegas director said he would lead a new Fallout game if he was granted creative freedom, which is inherently just him, I think, pointing out that he wasn't given as much creative freedom as he would have liked in creating Fallout New Vegas. And so, yeah, I doubt this is really on the table, and I seriously doubt creative freedom is on the table for any of the big franchises. You might be able to make a Starfield 2 with fairly large amounts of creative freedom, since that didn't sell that well, but as far as the Fallout series goes, as far as the Skyrim Elder Scrolls series, and as far as the probably even Starfield series goes, I would suspect those are locked down permanently under control of Peter Molyneux or Todd Howard. No, yeah, it's Todd Howard. Peter Molyneux is another guy. And this probably, if my assumption is correct, also highlights that the freedom that Amazon Prime had to make a Fallout TV series is just not reciprocated to other game developers like it should be. So jumping to a different format lets people have more freedom. This has been true certainly also with like Batman, where Warner Brothers has pretty tight control on what they want to see in Batman movies, but really doesn't give a damn about what happens in the Batman comics. So if you wanted to go make a non-canon spin-off Batman comic, you probably could do it. Although maybe Tim Gunn, now being in charge, would actually control that more. Of course, that has also been the complaint about comics, is that particularly when the character Batman would show up in all kinds of different spin-off comics, and it just didn't make any sense if you were trying to read all the comics or all the Batman comics as to why he would act differently in one section, or why he'd be in a completely different suit or a completely different area at the same time. Valve is also updating or implementing new rules to refine the Steam store page. Written descriptions, the subheadline here, and this is another thing I'm going to tweak, is to get the fonts to be bigger, is they've been seeing more and more store pages that are effectively advertisements for other store pages on Steam. I've been seeing, I guess I understand what they're saying, in that I've seen a lot of prologues, which they encouraged prologues, so that's their own fault for that. And demos certainly are inherently going to be advertisements for another store page. There are the cat games, Find the Hidden Cats number 27 or Find the Hidden Bees number 34. I could see throwing that also in that category, where there are definitely serialized games that get churned out way too quickly and are effectively just advertisements for buying the same game slightly altered multiple times over. But I suspect that actually Valve may just have a different view than what I'm seeing completely. Some developers and store pages present information or links that distract from learning about the games themselves, making it challenging for consumers to make educated purchasing decisions. So, in enforcing new rules and what can and cannot be included in your written store page descriptions, we know the changes to be written to your game description sections can be disruptive and make time to update. That this applies to the About the Game, short description, special announcements, and awards section of the store. It will prevent developers using those sections to link to other websites, including social media pages, embedding imagery that mimics Steam Store UI, or buttons, or including images, links, or widgets pointing to other Steam releases. Which that might hurt a few games, but probably not that much. And then developers have until September to tweak their store pages, or Valve is going to probably remove things automatically. Which, yeah, It's probably about the most draconian thing Valve has done in a very long time as far as the Steam store goes. A little bit more polish to their store certainly will help the store be as good as it can be, and make sure that it doesn't just have yet another avenue in which it can be gamed. Of course, this is one of those decisions that is also fairly generic and not targeting any specific games. It is simply targeting people who are making bad descriptions. Now, I suppose this is an interesting bit of news, but probably not very relevant. A man has apparently connected 444 consoles to one TV to earn a Guinness World Record. Let's see. And he says his favorite gaming console is the Sega Genesis. Which, you've got to wonder how he did that without running up a massive amount of attenuation and impedance issues, because that's a lot of what I assume is RCA wires and a lot of grounding. It's not that crazy though, because if you have HDMI switchers and then you've modded all of them to HDMI, that solves a big issue immediately, which is shielding issues. And if you're not using any RCA connections, and if you had an HDMI switcher that was a like 50 or 100 unit, you'd only need to have like a small handful of those switchers, because 100 unit, 2 100 units, 3 100 units, 4 100 units easily gets to 444. And even if you use smaller ones, like, it is kind of exponential in that a 10 unit connected to another 10 unit would already give you, well, 10 units connected to an 11th 10 unit would give you 100. So you would only have to do that 4 more times, 3 more times. So that can be done with less than 50 10 units if you were going to make a branching tree setup. The power itself would be a big issue. And I also have to question why Genesis would even want to give a record for this. It's really dumb record to have. It doesn't serve a practical purpose. In particular because he's very obviously connecting the same things over and over again. Yeah, which there's just not a good reason for that unless you're leaving specific games plugged into specific systems. I believe this man is from Saudi Arabia too, so that's where the level of this collection's wealth, I imagine, comes from. But yeah, if you were to take every single system, including TV systems like that, and connect it, you still would struggle to get to 444 units without duplicates. And it's not nicely displayed or anything. Let's just be honest about that. How did he get a Virtual Boy to output anything? That's interesting. Yeah, I see a Steam Deck. Yeah, he's got 2 switches there that look to be about 20 units. And then I imagine he has several other switchers of different kinds there clearly are some RCA connections, but he may be using RCA to HDMI, which may solve some things. And I would imagine to get the Guinness record, he had to record himself turning on and interacting with the controller of every single system. That I imagine that's exactly how they would make the rule before they would certify it. And they maybe sent someone to actually watch him turn it on. But yeah. It really boggles the mind as far as the ridiculousness on this, because there's a much more interesting solution here, which would be save the money and don't buy the switchers, save the money and don't buy duplicate consoles, and buy monitors, just TVs. 400 TVs would be much more interesting, each with their own console on it. And if you're just infinitely rich, that would make more sense. And it wouldn't be 400 TVs realistically. You would have a much more reasonable 5 consoles connected to TVs. But yeah, having more TVs, having bigger TVs would make way more sense and give you much more value. And certainly some purists are going to complain that he has an LCD screen and he's connecting a bunch of analog devices to it. But apparently that's what it takes to get a Guinness World Record these days. So yeah, here we're looking at the SteamDB chart as far as the concurrent players, and we apparently had a pretty big spike in Counter-Strike 2 players in the last 24 hours. And Banana is still very high up on this list. But Deadlock had 18,000 concurrent players. That's what they were talking about. So how far down do we really have to scroll? That is less in his beta testing numbers than Overwatch 2, which highlights the pointlessness and silliness of highlighting a game that has a high number of players in beta testing when the game hasn't been announced, comparing that to games that have been out like Left 4 Dead 2, which has been around for a lot longer. But yeah, Deadlock is way down here. It has its own title now on SteamDB at the 72nd spot with a peak concurrent of 23,327. So yes, it's one of the most concurrent played games this week in the top 100, which means only so much when you consider that OBS Studio being run on Steam has a peak concurrent of the last 24 hours of 17,000 people, and then there's just definitely some games here that I haven't ever even heard of. Yeah, I'm repeating myself almost every stream to say this, but inherently I'm not satisfied with this being the right metric as far as concurrent players to indicate if there is even a gaming community as far as what the gaming community is actually playing. Because yeah, I just don't really feel like there is good information there. It might be more relevant, frankly, to just see what games are being trended on Twitch or what are being trended on YouTube as far as games that people are excited about and hyped about. As far as me trying to boil down this information, all I continue to see is just a downward trend of the top games being played less and less. Some of that is because the games are kids are getting back into school, but I imagine it isn't too much of that, because I don't think we've gotten to a point where kids are getting Steam Decks for Christmas and moving over to PC gaming in any other way. But that's probably some small reason of it. So let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles. August's catalog of PlayStation Plus games and classics have been announced. It includes The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, Wild Heart, Cult of Lamb, and the Time Splitters trilogy. Interesting, the Time Splitters trilogy is included there. We talked about in the last stream that Krafton had bought the IP to Hi-Fi Rush. According to another YouTuber I watched that I have a tendency to believe, it seems like they did actually hire back about 75 employees that worked at Tango Gameworks, which is probably not all of the employees, but that is a weird situation there where they actually are seemingly trying to keep the teams together and not just own the intellectual property. But that inherently just assumes that there's no psychic trauma that happens when your company is shut down and you're laid off, or you lose even a few members to a game. I definitely don't think those 75 employees who have been hired back can be considered to be in the same mental state, in the same just situation that they would have been in when they made Hi-Fi Rush. So that just widens the possibility that a Hi-Fi Rush 2 being made would be a very different game and feel very different. Let's Build a Zoo Studio has announced an MMORPG dev sim called Let's Build a Dungeon. Which, okay. There is a question certainly to ask there as far as, is it an actual MMO, or is it just that it's a simulation where you're building an MMO? It says it has some online gameplay though. See, I imagine this is kind of what they're talking about on Steam, is that you have Let's Build a Zoo just being pointed out as a advertisement, and they're probably just tired of that. Now inherently also, if the relevant for you section, or the more from this developer section, or the more like this section were just better programmed, then them adding their own links like this would be less necessary. But yeah, I'm guessing this goes away because I'm suspecting that Play Our First Management Sim is not actually a section where recent events and announcement is actually a section, and they've just put this under this section. But in the deep description, I don't know if I've seen a lot of games that have been too bad about linking to other games in the description. But also clearly they want to get rid of these Discord links. Yeah, when you see a read more on any website, inherently they know that that means most of the people aren't going to look at that section. And then there is also a danger that you could just put a ton of text here to try and push people away from reading the reviews. And yeah, even on just picking this first random link, I do see two things that are a bit of a distraction. Now, in fairness, I think tags are a problem because they're abused and not very helpful, even though they should be helpful. I think there is this here is in the way. I think this is probably in the wrong spot. I think it's still crazy that Steam hasn't invented their own age system. You have a whole bunch of connected things here. So it just takes a long time to get down to even the system requirements, which probably should be higher up and maybe go the full width of it. And then these are hidden way at the bottom, trying to convince you to look at something different if you don't care about this game. And then reviews are just hidden way at the bottom, which arguably maybe reviews should be put somewhere in the middle. Of course, there's a lot of stuff you could do to improve the Steam storefronts, and I do expect they will eventually just launch a whole new layout. Square Enix could switch to the Unreal Engine 5 for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. The company is exploring whether changing engines would accelerate development. I seriously doubt anybody sane would tell you that switching engines would accelerate development in any way. The only way that possibly could accelerate development is if they were giving Part 3 development over to a brand new company that was already familiar with Unreal Engine 5, and there isn't any companies that are familiar with Unreal Engine 5 because it's brand new. So yeah, I'm sure Unreal Engine 5 claims that some things will make development faster, but yeah, it's not really likely to happen. And that would be bad for the game series overall. It's better to, if you are going to make a trilogy series, to have everything just consistent and run on Unreal Engine 4, which is, I assume, what it's running on. If they were still running on Unreal Engine 3, then yeah, go to 5 at that point. But this almost certainly is an example, yet another example, Square Enix just being bad managers, saying things out loud they shouldn't say, eroding trust in their products and faith, and not showing faith in their developers, and micromanaging. I'll leave it at that. 2 Point Museum has been announced. It is the third of the 2 Point series of humorous simulations. Although I did hear a lot of mainstream video game journalists talk about the 2 Point previous games. I'm not sure I ever heard anybody actually play it. Speaking of playing games, I have fully recognized here that I've dropped the ball as far as scheduling videos on my own channel. And yeah, unfortunately, that has only gotten me more subscribers and more watch time, according to YouTube analytics. But that's why I, in part, don't really trust YouTube analytics that much. But yeah, according to YouTube, the best thing I could do is stop putting out pre-recorded footage and put out less content overall, which, in being stuck now in this emergency that is just likely going to go on for a very long time, that makes a lot of sense. I still wouldn't want to sit around and do nothing, however, so I'd still want to play games, which justifies scheduling things, but I may very well just schedule only one show to air. That being said, I need to start scheduling things like crazy. I need to get things into a schedule and airing. I probably have 4 or 5 months worth of content that I haven't scheduled that I need to schedule, so I have no intention of starting to play any new games until I catch up on scheduling. And the hope is that my macro will work, and it seems like it's working, to make that an easier, faster experience. I also have a lot of things that I need to do. I'm going to break the Steam follow list up as its own separate function and no longer included in the live streams, since that has always been just kind of a waste of time, and is just increasingly going to be a waste of time also. Beetlejuice is coming to Multiversus next week, and they have new character trailers. Beetlejuice here being animated in a very different way from the way I would expect him to look. Until Dawn's PS5 and PC release date has been confirmed. The rebuilt and enhanced versions will be out in October. Yeah, my dumb camera system is just beeping like crazy, and every time I was hoping I could get it to work, but yeah, I don't think it is. I think I'm gonna have to probably take the whole thing apart. Fallout New Vegas' director says he would lead a new Fallout game if he was granted creative freedom. We already talked about that. Helldivers 2 director responds to fan complaints by saying the latest update didn't hit our target. Some things we just didn't get right, says, adding that we're going to own that. And then we talked about 440 consoles on one TV. Goemon, spiritual successor Bakaru, is coming to the West. Didn't realize that Goemon had a spiritual successor. A new Black Ops 6 trailer showcases Zombies launch map Terminus. Yeah. It is crazy that the zombies concept in Black Ops has never spun off into its own game. But I guess at a certain point, Call of Duty has really just become its own platform and its own service, where the zombies maps are sold in as just part of what Call of Duty is, on top of other maps being sold, on top of Warzone being sold, on top of Black Ops being sold, on top of the main story single player being sold, which calling the single player the main story, the main anything, I think is probably inaccurate at this point. Gamescom's opening night live will include new game announcements. It's going to also feature Black Ops 6, Monster Hunter Wild, Indiana Jones, and more. Is Jeff Keighley going to be the host? Yes. Yeah. I thought Gamescom was the German event. The event in Germany. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Why would Jeff Keighley be in charge of it? Well, I guess at this point Jeff Keighley has just figured out how to be in charge of every event. Yeah, it is in Cologne, Germany. So Keighley potentially could just go around the world year-round being the host for video game things. I guess the hope here is that Jeff Keighley never gets canceled for anything, because if he did, then a major figurehead of the games industry would disappear. Of course, inherently, that's kind of what happened to Adam Sessler, but it didn't happen until way past his peak and prime anyways. But it is kind of a shame that we didn't have an alternate reality where Adam Sessler was just hosting every Game Awards show, or showing up and making announcements. let's see, developers have reportedly been told not to expect a Switch 2, or whatever they're actually going to call it, before the launch of April, to launch before April 2025. January, February, April. That really only leaves 1 month as far as the first quarter. No, that's not even how that would break. That's the second quarter. Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if the next Switch doesn't launch until like Black Friday of next year, really. But I imagine the hardware has already been locked in, so the longer they take to launch it, the lower stats and specs that the hardware will have. It is interesting how you have a increasingly standardized top of portable devices between the Steam Deck and the Switch, and that there is a vent that is going to vent out heating. There's a volume up and down, there's a power button, and there is a headphone jack, and then there's some kind of interconnectability, whether it's USB-C in the Steam Deck or a game cartridge. Yeah, I don't know if that is actually anything there, though. That may just be where you screw it down. But yeah, there definitely seems like there's a standardization there, and I like that the standardization still is including headphone connectors and volume control connectors, whereas I could see those disappearing. And that definitely is a good argument to think about as far as what would a Switch made by PlayStation or a Switch made by Xbox actually look like. PlayStation wanting a white, curvy, artistic, sleek design would likely not have real physical buttons, maybe capacitive touch sensitive buttons to turn on, but very possibly would get rid of volume up and down, would try and hide as best they could in events, probably would get rid of a headphone jack, and would try to get rid of any interconnectability. Xbox, on the other hand, trying not to be artistic, may have nothing on the top. At best, it would probably be just a physical on and off button, getting rid of headphones, and they may very well have expansion ports, but it might be some proprietary expansion port. Yeah, we already talked about this. Sony has revealed that Concord's post-launch roadmap exists, so I guess you can read this at Video Games Chronicle if you're interested. And Video Games Chronicle is now, after establishing and promoting their Patreon last few weeks, they are now promoting and pushing their Patreon more, in that they have added a Vintage Games Retro podcast, which I think probably you have to be a Patreon to listen to. So we're seeing Video Games Chronicle increasingly move towards podcasting, move away from being a paper-written journalism site, which, yeah, that has been a trend for a while now, where people have moved into podcasting and tried to sell themselves and their personalities more than the information that they're presenting. Inherently, this might mean Video Games Chronicles just gets so annoying that it's no longer a viable news source for me, which would require me to find a new news source if I could find one. On the other hand, it may just be that they start doing side projects and it doesn't change too much. Way Forward is turning Halloween and Ash vs. Evil Dead into 16-bit style platformers, which Yeah, neither one of these characters really known for their jumping abilities and platforming abilities, but I could see the idea there in that a 16-bit game probably does line up as far as the feel that you would have for these kinds of games. Yeah. And noticeably, it is also worth pointing out that Ash vs. the Evil Dead and Halloween as franchises can't really go too much further in TV or movie productions. The Ash vs. Evil TV show I enjoyed quite a bit, but the actor who plays Ash is very much too old to be making movie or TV shows anymore. And while you can always put somebody different in the mask to be Mike Myers in Halloween, those types of movies are not really just going to work. The Assassin's Creed Shadows producer says that 4 years is the right balance to make a new entry. I would argue 4 years is what you get. 4 years is probably not the right balance. More realistically, 5 to 6 years to develop a new entry would be what games should take. But people are not willing to wait, and there just aren't enough games out there. Meanwhile, the Japanese people seem to be way more upset still with this Assassin's Creed Shadows announcement than the Westerners, who have mostly forgotten that it even exists. So I still would suspect that this game may just get shoved out by Ubisoft and then never mentioned again, just because they created a controversy of their own making, really. It almost certainly would have made more sense to have the one black samurai character show up as DLC or in the second or third game, instead of having him be your co-character, your co-main character. They should have been severely less ambitious as far as who the Assassin's characters were going to be. Yeah. And I imagine we won't see an Assassin's Creed 2 style of series in that any of these characters show up for sequels. In fact, I don't know if any character really has shown up as a sequel character in any of the Assassin's Creed games, other than Ezio from the Assassin's Creed 2 games. Alien Romulus pays tribute to Alien Isolation with a telephone Easter egg, the director says, which is barely news. Red Dead Redemption is coming to PC after 14 years, a store listing suggests, including the game's expansion Undead Nightmare. I imagine it will be a rough play unless it gets a remaster. And inherently, Red Dead Redemption is only just adding the second game of a trilogy onto PC. Red Dead Revolver, which is barely connected to the Red Dead Redemption and whatever the most recent one is called, Red Dead Redemption 2, I guess. But yeah, I bet Red Dead Revolver never comes to PC. But it also feels kind of backwards, and it feels like Rockstar is probably doing this just to make a few more bucks before GTA 6 comes out, and then they put all their focus into GTA 6 for the next 10 plus years. Fallout London's developers now plan to launch as an indie studio. That makes a lot of sense, although it very possibly would make more sense for them to see how well their development was going as a mod maker and realize that they had enough success to then become an indie studio and find a publisher to just convert Fallout London into being its own game. I think now there's a real danger. I've seen one other game do it, where there was a Fallout mod that then got a publisher and made the game run as its own separate game instead of being a Fallout mod. But yeah, there's a danger of confusion, marketplace confusion now, if they were to try and release Fallout London, remove the Fallout imagery, remove the Fallout branding, and sell it. I don't think that's what they're really going to try and do. I think they're going to try and make something totally brand new, which I'm sure they're more interested in doing, and just coast off the success of the Fallout London. Yeah, of the gameplay, a small bit of gameplay I did see in Fallout London, it definitely looked interesting and like a different experience and worth potentially checking out. Of course, I'd have to justify playing Fallout 4 first, which I don't think I'm going to get around to that anytime soon. Stalker 2 has gotten a 36-minute developer deep dive video, if you want to check that out. And then the open world game Terminator Survivors has been delayed to 2025. And then we talked about this in the last stream, that the Pokemon's Misty and Jessie voice actor Rachel Lillis has passed away. This is a female English voice actress. I guess they all go by actor nowadays. Brandy Pitchford teases a Borderlands 4. I also saw a YouTuber claiming he also went on a rant about how poorly reviewed Borderlands the movie is, which that too is very believable, but I haven't confirmed if it's actually true. But yeah, he went on some kind of like Twitter rant or something, is the allegation I saw. If he did go on a rant, it would be an interesting comparison, certainly, to him being fairly silent about selling the company to Embracer, or Embracer selling the company to 2K. Then the EA Sports Football Club 25 Heroes lineup has been announced. Then that brings us to the Gematsu articles. PlayStation Plus catalog and classics lineup for August have been announced. Skydance's Behemoth launches November 14th. Yeah. And this is, I guess, what I'd ideally like is that I'm going to try and add some padding on the custom style sheet, so it is just one full page with no extra text, because this looks way worse to my eye than this does. So I'm okay with a little bit of empty space here, but ideally I still think I am going to try and stretch that to the edges with maybe 10 pixels on either side. I don't want it to go edge to edge. Yeah, design in general is a difficult thing and not really my forte. Let's Build a Dungeon is announced for Xbox One, Series, and PC. Exoborn launches in 2025 and has a gameplay trailer and screenshots. Gimmick 2 launches September 5th for the Switch and PC, and then shortly after for the PS5 and 4 and the Xbox One and Series. This is an example of it barely fitting because the headline was so big, and inherently the font size here needs to be adjusted to be a little bit more dynamic and a little bit smaller. 2 Point Museum has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. I don't know if my macro actually opened any tabs. based on links from Komatsu. Multiversus adds Beetlejuice on August 20th. LC launches September 10th, which inherently, if I did lose video games, if I did lose Video Games Chronicles as a news source, I still would have pretty decent amount of news just from Komatsu and GameDeveloper.com. In fact, I could lose GameDeveloper.com also. Action adventure platformer The Nightling has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. Yep. Definitely feels like being halfway through August, though, that I am certainly in less of a mood to want to have games be announced, particularly without them having release dates that are fairly close before January 1st at least. Yeah. In a lot of ways, it feels like if a game is being announced here, that is just another admission that all of 2024 has just been abandoned as far as releasing games, and that we could call 2024 the year of no good games, no new games. You mentioned Stellar Blade as an exception, I guess. The Until Dawn remake launches October 4th with enhancements to graphics, gameplay, story elements, and more detailed. Which inherently, if I was going to play the remake on PC today, that means that I have just successfully ignored Until Dawn and all of the anthology games that were inspired as spiritual successors to Until Dawn. And so there's probably a good 7 to 10 years worth of games that came out exclusively on the PlayStation that I've managed to skip and could now catch up on. Of course, that's not the best situation ever. I don't want to just try and catch up on games I missed. And yeah, I guess that is increasingly becoming what half of the gaming industry is that remasters are just trying to get people to play games they missed before. Which, yeah. The system is broken. It becomes much closer to, say, the DVD system, where there's just reselling of the same movies that have been out for decades and decades, and bargain bin DVDs and Blu-rays, or cheap Blu-ray versions of DVDs that don't have any new features. But yeah, speaking of DVDs, I was actually very surprised to see Linus Tech Tips put out a video talking about ripping Blu-rays and 4K UHDs, and yeah, increasingly he seems to be willing to engage with making that kind of content as things and functions and options seem to go away. Now, I don't inherently really want to talk about Monster Hunter Wilds weapon trailers anymore, so I'm going to skip these going forward. The game Replaced has been delayed to 2025. There also seem to be an era of delays. By Sweet Carol has been delayed to 2025. This game I think has already been delayed, so I wouldn't be surprised if this game is just going to be delayed for a very long time. Animation, when you're trying to do a different type of animation, is probably fairly difficult, and I imagine even if the animation is done, it might be a problem of figuring out how to make gameplay work with this style of animation. But yeah, this style of animation has only really worked with a few games like Space Ace, where it was just press a button to interact and play a different movie, and those kinds of games, one button games, aren't going to really work. Date A Live Rin Dystopia for PC launches September 5th. The Fate Stay games were recently released, the original visual novels, in English, and according to my sources, the translation is apparently pretty bad in English. I don't know if inherently they would have deserved better, but I don't know if you really should expect much better. Multiplayer action platformer Mother Machine has been announced for consoles and PC. That looks like that might be something. Of course, it could be nothing. And then Skytance's Behemoth launching November 14th. Let's Build a Dragon. Alright, this is probably going to take just a second, but I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So yeah, that wasn't too long of a break. Still having breaks in the middle and interruptions in the middle of streaming, particularly for non-necessary reasons. It's annoying. So yeah, we really don't have too much news left. Then we'll be done. This might be an hour and 30-minute long stream, which is good. Let's just get this as short as possible, and then I can work on other things. Let's Build a Dungeon announced for the Xbox Series and PC, Xbox One also. And then this is, I guess, the one instance where the link did work. Let's see, let's reload the page and see what happened there. Yeah, or let's not, and let's just move on. And I know my macro broke up as it was trying to run the Komatsu articles. Let's move on to the GameDeveloper.com articles. That page took forever to load. A Korean developer is reporting that there's a burst of interest in single-player console and PC games. Developers at Pearl, Abyss, RoundDB, Shift Up, and other studios say developers and players in the region want to break out of the free-to-play market. Interestingly, I know another thing in that Nikkei Goddess of Victory, the second game made by Shift Up, with Destiny Child being the first game by Shift Up, Destiny Child being shut down now, Nikkei Goddess of Victory is doing a Neon Genesis Evangelion crossover event, which that is a big license to get. It's probably not that hard of a license to get, but that is a big license to get, particularly for a Korean company like Shift Up, as far as a crossover event. Although, in fairness, Destiny Child had crossover events with Hatsune Miku 3 times, and Kikomi Friends at least once, and several other things. So they had kind of a history of doing crossover events for their mobile free-to-play games. But yeah, it certainly would be better for Western gamers like me in particular if we saw Korean developers focus more on single-player games, console and PC games, and less on cell phone mobile games, because the cell phone and mobile games have limited lifespans, averaging only about 3 years before they get shut down, and particularly in Korea and Japan, a lot of these free-to-play games are very much pay to win and very, very expensive, and so they don't work if you try to directly translate them over to Western markets, and then you end up making a Western version that is fairly different. Destiny Child in Korea was very different from Destiny Child in Japan, which was very different from the Destiny Child global version. But yeah, if all it takes is one game like Stellar Blade to have a decent amount of success to change the direction the entire industry is going in Korea, that is interesting. But it also probably speaks to how Korea and Japan at a certain level just doesn't have enough people in it to stay as stable. There is a potential future where Japanese companies that make video games just can't hire enough people to continue to make games, and they have to expand to become more multinational corporations, and then you'll see them eventually just move their offices into the United States or into Europe, or some other country, just because of that. The need for more of a global mentality, which I could imagine Korea doing that way before Japan did that. This is going to be, if this burst of interest lasts, which it may very well just be a fad too, it's going to be a long time though before you start seeing Korean companies having teams that can even make decent single player console and PC games, because that is a very different thing than making a free-to-play mobile game. Different type of animation, different type of programming, different type of scale. And it is worth pointing out that even Stellar Blade was very much ripping off Nier Automata in a lot of ways, and its story wasn't amazing or unique, so even Stellar Blade could have used a second pass as far as trying to be more unique, trying to have a better story. But yeah, I would much prefer Korean developers be interested in making single player console and PC games over free-to-play games. I'd love to see free-to-play games mostly die out, which I think probably will happen. There just isn't as much potential in free-to-play games as people had hoped. Here is Steam, which I don't know why the Steam page ended up in the wrong place, but it did. You can see that there is not any real sale going on. Yeah. I wish more than them announcing new Steam Decks, if they just found ways to make the old Steam Decks cheaper. It would be very much a different consideration if the Steam Deck was available refurbished at $250 more consistently. That would be the LCD version. Or if you could get a refurb OLED for $350, that would be much more of an interesting thing. Because now that I have one for myself, it's nieces and nephews time as far as how many of these can I really afford to buy for nieces and nephews, and the amount is right now 0, because yeah, even one is paying quite the premium there. Payload Studios is laying off 25% of its workforce. Some of these GameDeveloper.com headlines may be old. Krafton leads $11.3 million investment into eschatology entertainment. Eschatology is a weird word. I've heard it, but I don't remember what it means. Valve has implemented new rules to refine the store page written descriptions. Like, inherently, Valve just implementing these rules and then automatically changing some people's pages may be a great way for Valve to realize how there is a large number, probably thousands, of store pages that are being unmonitored and not maintained in any way whatsoever on Steam. And yeah, abandoning your product and just not being in contact with Valve and just taking the money and running shouldn't really be a viable option. For a storefront like Steam, I think it would be very valid that every quarter you would have to reply. You would have to have some kind of email contact with Steam of some value. I could see Valve just automatically saying, once a year we're going to send you a code, and if you don't go into this certain page and type in this code, your store is going to be delisted. Your page is going to be delisted, just to make sure people are alive and that money isn't just transferring into some bank account. But yeah, inherently, tax information, like normally in the United States, if you're collecting sales tax for one of the states in the United States, that has to be done usually quarterly, 4 times a year. Income tax once a year at least. So if that kind of paperwork is acceptable for running a business, you could definitely say, if you're not talking to us once a quarter, we should take your page down. Inherently, though, I think Valve and Steam are taking people's pages down effectively by just burying them under a pile of other garbage games that nobody other than me are ever going to see. Marvelous has restructured its publishing labels for a more holistic Western expansion, which, not sure if that really is going to change too much. Looking at these pictures, you've got 4 kind of anime looking games under the Marvelous brand, and then you've got 4 anime kind of looking games under the Xseed brand. Not sure if there's much really that's going to change there. Owlcat Games opens a third-party narrative game-focused publishing label. VR studio Archaeatic is shutting down. Apparently, Glow Golf developer Alex Johansson says that they're currently choking to death. That the industry must engage with new audiences. I question if there is that many more new audiences. Yeah, and this Glow Golf looks to me very much like it is an art piece more than an actual game. Yeah. Inherently, the remaining percentage of people on the planet that could play video games that aren't playing video games either fall into one or two categories, in that they refuse to play video games and never will, and they'll just have to die out, or they are in a situation where they cannot play video games. I think we are approaching 100% saturation as far as the willing audience of gamers out there, and we probably are approaching 100% saturation as far as the amount of time gamers have to play games. That too should be a consideration. Keywords has acquired the work-for-hire studio Wushu to expand its creative division. Ethical Games is looking to craft industry-wide ethics codes, seeks developers' input. And then Rachel Lillis, iconic Pokemon voice actor, passed away at the age of 46. And then touch apparently can bring people together like nothing else, sparking connections through video game intimacy. I talked about this in the last stream. It's an interesting thought, but clearly the Crazy Golf article and this article are both from interviews that were done at some kind of art show presentation. Yeah. Particularly with like COVID right now, it is fairly crazy to encourage touch, even though most people are in situations where they feel COVID is completely over and not a concern. It would certainly be crazy to encourage new spreads of new diseases by having games that involve touch. Although I imagine most people aren't going to be concerned about that. I still don't have the duplicate tab closer. I probably should use that and reinstall that as a plugin. That'll save me a little bit of time. Alright, let's now go through all the new games on Steam and then we'll be done for today. So, yeah, I'm a sucker for point and click adventures. There's something on the zoom here. I'd like it to be zoomed in more, but I need the follow buttons to be visible. Yeah. Is there something? It might be. I still am in a weird situation with the YouTube Shorts also, in that I have like 150, so I could schedule them, but I really don't want them to go more than 30 days in the future, so it's programmed only to cycle around for the next 30 days. But that still is a lot of shorts, perhaps not enough though to replace pre-recorded footage by any means. I don't think that there's actually any way to compare the two. Definitely two different audiences. I got an interesting situation where I needed to make a WhatsApp account and I've never used WhatsApp before. For a second there, it looked like it might have been something that as a content creator might have been useful, but nah, I don't think it really works that way. I don't think YouTube content creators put their videos on WhatsApp. And for me in particular, that'd be like trying to do something with my Discord. There's just not enough of an audience, and I just don't have enough subscribers in one place to expand to another place. Now, the fall list I think may have actually run, as far as fall list cleanup, somewhat today, so we may run into some games that are very old. Do I want to give this a chance? Nah. And I don't know if my curation system is working or not. Could be. Might not be. And we may find that a lot of these already are on the fall list, which means I probably have already made a YouTube short around them. There is a thought as far as how could I convert these YouTube shorts into longer videos. I don't really see a way of doing that. Yeah. Looking at these rubber ducks reminded me that the Taskmaster VR game came out. I saw some people play it and it was pretty awful. Like just a low effort licensed game. Which is a shame, and it's a VR game too, so very few people will ever see it or play it. I also watched a speedrun of Islands of Insight, which was the most boring speedrun I've ever seen, in that it literally was just playing the game. There was no real speedrun strats of any interest. There's no cheats or tricks around it, no easy way to solve the whole world. And seems like it was kind of a crazy speedrun too, because you're just solving a bunch of logic grid puzzles, which means either somebody has memorized all the solutions to those puzzles, or he had all the answers on a second screen next to him, or even on an overlay, which I bet you could certainly do that too, is just have an overlay showing you what the solutions are. But yeah, not a very thrilling speedrun. And inherently that is the problem with a lot of speedruns, and why they never get really highlighted is because a lot of games, there isn't just anything interesting in the different way you would play to speedrun versus the way you would play a game normally. I'll give this a chance. I guess I'm probably getting old in that I look at a game like this and I want to give it a chance, when I think modern gamers would probably say there's no reason to even give that a second thought. Yeah, I could see like these 101 hidden cats being one of these games. But inherently what you're going to start to see is, with the new rules, is that you'll just have incredibly simplistic about these games and reviews, and it will just be more from the same people. But even when you see this really small reviews and about this game section, you see that this column, as I have it set up at least, never stretches and goes down to the bottom. Yeah. Alright, well, I'm gonna have to take another break, so okay, I'm back. Man, every time I start these dual lives, it just reminds me how ridiculous Yu-Gi-Oh! Has gotten at this point, with just the massive amount of special summoning and nonsense you have to do. I saw a meme about it where it's like Yu-Gi-Oh! Originally was, I summon a card in attack position, I end my turn. Now it's, I special summon 25 different things and then defeat you on the second turn, or do 25 actions just to counter 25 other actions. The power creep is 25 years in as far as Yu-Gi-Oh! And yeah, I would have hoped to hear more about Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush as a concept actually succeeding and coming to the West as a way of potentially soft rebooting it. But yeah, I don't know if that's really ever going to happen. So we were going through the games on Steam, and then I kind of interrupted that time because the water link sensor got wet during it cleaning, so no issue there. Definitely not an issue that really needs an alarm to go off, but the water sensor can't tell the difference between, oh no, the pipe has burst versus somebody just got it wet. Let's see, we'll give this targeted a chance. See, G4 had this late night lineup, and I keep trying to compare my channel to what would be broadcast TV as far as just wanting to have 3 to 6 shows air at the same time every day, or 3 to 6 primetime shows airing every weekday, and potentially having a late night lineup too. And obviously that does not work on YouTube. But yeah, I definitely remember staying up in the middle of the night not being able to sleep, and I guess maybe that's my own unique experience watching G4 TV and watching them just play trailers and cinematics and cutscenes from video games. Which, yeah, I wonder if my YouTube shorts, it would have been nice if my YouTube shorts would work that way, where there would just be 30-minute experiences. Here we have the remake of The Devil's Playhouse. This is the 3rd time they've released it, effectively, because they released it, they released a remaster, and now they're releasing it again. Although inherently this maybe has shifted ownership. Skunk Ape Games now self-publishing it. But yeah, there's that really wouldn't work. The first part of that, as far as why that wouldn't work, is I would need to find 30 minutes of open source music or copyright free music to work with, and that in itself would be a problem. And then I would need some other thoughts. Hey, they've updated their website, I think, a little bit here as far as the Steam Deck. They may have reduced the price a little bit too, because I recall paying $600 for the 512 OLED. Now $650, but maybe there's some tax thrown in there that would bump it up to $600. Probably is tax. 3 to 12 hours of gameplay. I've noticed that the battery on mine not lasting as much as I would like, considering I'm not really doing anything gaming wise on it. But yeah, $400 for the 256 gigabyte LCD. I would like to see it move to an OLED screen for another $60 and the same storage space, but I imagine storage space is not an issue. And then you're really at this point getting ripped off to buy $350 for the 64 gigabyte or $449 for just double the space, but still getting the LCD version with the worse battery system too. Looks like they may have redone this concept also. One thing, when I put the Steam Deck in the hands of kids, they immediately said they liked the thumbstick way better than what they would have experienced on the Switch. So even kids who don't have any other experience seem to know that these Nintendo Switch thumbsticks suck. Of course, that is also a conversation point, so I wouldn't be surprised if they are just parroting what they've heard from other people say. And I guess a 512 refurbed for $360 is in stock. Yep. Alright, well, I am mostly just wasting time here. Let me just quickly go through my Twitter feed just to see if there's any big news. Otherwise, we are going to end this stream at 1 hour and 50 minutes, which is a fairly high, I would say, fairly short stream. The shorter the better. I'm still only averaging like 9 minutes worth of watch time. So, yeah, I need loyal fans who have infinite amounts of free time to actually watch these live streams all the way through, or at least give me, I need people willing to give me a chance and not just get bored 9 minutes into the stream. Yeah. Let's see. Valve apparently has launched a helpfulness system, and they also are being accused of abusing NDAs with the deadlock beta. I already thought they pretty much had a helpfulness system established in the reviews, and that joke reviews were taggable as funny. So I don't know what they'd really change there. Yeah, apparently Valve has launched a helpfulness system for Steam reviews. Joke user reviews are still approved, but Valve's new Steam system helps players learn what others actually think before buying the game. It'll be interesting to see how that's implemented. One-word reviews, once made of memes or ASCII art, will be placed behind actual reviews. Even so, the developer acknowledges that humorous but unhelpful posts can be toggled back onto the store page proper through the display drop-down menu. So they're just going to be hiding the joke reviews. That's probably a good thing. Very often the one-word reviews and the joke reviews take too much of a prominence and make it more difficult to see real reviews. So clearly Valve is making changes and working in several different directions. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long now, since they've announced support for the ROG Ally, how long will it be before they actively decide to release a new SteamOS version that supports it, and how long will it be before ROG Ally really can install it? Because it's been fairly long just to even get a new recovery image. And at a certain level, I almost wonder if you might see a SteamOS 4 that just has a completely different desktop architecture around it. I doubt they changed from Arch Linux being the base flavor of Linux that it's built on, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they decided to go away from KDE to GNOME instead, or to Cinnamon possibly. There's a lot of different desktop possibilities there, and yeah, there is an argument that they potentially shouldn't have started with KDE in the first place and should have instead gone with Kubuntu's desktop engine. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.